everybody, this is Dan Miller for Bluegrass Unlimited magazine, and today I want to start a series of videos about bass runs on the guitar. Over the years I've taught a lot of guitar workshops, and people always have questions about bass runs, and so I thought I would start a series on bass runs. We'll take it slow and we'll take it one step at a time, kind of putting together building upon each lesson, building upon another, and we're just going to stay in the key of G. And if you want to go to other keys, I recommend that you just figure out the same kind of runs in whatever key you're working with. Of course, if you have the capo and you can stay in the G position, that's fine, but sometimes you'll have to go into C shapes or D shapes or whatever you're working with. But if we just work in the key of G, you can move those things using the same principles that we start out in the key of G. We'll use key of G sort of as our Rosetta Stone, and as you change to other keys you can use those same ideas that we talk about here. Part of the thing I recommend with bass runs, like I recommend with kind of all rhythm techniques, is that you just start out slow. Tim May and Brad Davis and I did a book years ago called The Flatpicker's Guide to Rhythm, Timing, and Groove. And in the bass run section of that book, I think we put out 50 different ways that you could go from G to C to D in a 1-4-5 progression in the key of G. And so there's lots and lots of things you can do. And in this series, we'll talk about some of those things. We won't go through all 50 of them, but we'll start real simple and we'll progress forward. And again, that's the way I recommend you do it, because you can get sort of overwhelmed with bass runs and you can overdo bass runs, right? Just depends on the setting and the situation you find yourself in, especially if there's a bass player, you don't want to get in his way or her way. But bass runs are cool, and there's a time for bass runs, and if they're tastefully done, they can add a lot to the music, okay? One of the reasons you use bass runs is one of the things that fulfills one of your jobs in the rhythm section is to help the listener's ear anticipate the next chord change, okay? So if you're in the G chord and use that bass run to walk up to the C chord, landing on that C note in the C chord when the chord changes, then you've given the listening audience a signal that something's getting ready to move, something's getting ready to change, and sometimes that's very helpful and to make the song more cohesive and give that listener a clue about what's coming next, okay? So that's a nice reason to use bass runs. So the reason I say take it slow and not overdo it all at once is because when you're in the heat of battle, so to speak, when you're in that on stage or in that studio or in the jam session, and you've got too many of these bass run ideas in your head and not practice them enough on their own, it can be confusing about which one's going to fit or which one do you want to use. So what I recommend people do is you learn just one way to change from G to C, one way to change from C to D, one way to change maybe from D to G or C to G or D to C, all the different changes that you might anticipate in the key of G in a 1-4-5 progression, which is that kind of progression is what we're going to typically see most of the time in bluegrass. Just learn one way to do it first and practice that a lot. You know, every time you're in the jam, use that one thing. It may sound monotonous at first, right, until you learn some other ways to do it, but you need that experience with doing it to see, to get it under your fingers, to get it in your muscle memory, so to speak, and then to see how it works, to see how it fits in different songs, right? And then once you get really familiar with that and can do it without consciously thinking about it, it just comes out naturally, then you want to move on and say, okay, now I'm ready to learn another way to change from G to C or C to D or D back to G, and then practice that for a long time until that gets into your subconscious and into your intuitive feel, and then go to the next one. So you want to build slowly so you don't overwhelm yourself with choices when it comes time to change to that next chord. But once all these things sort of get in your subconscious, then with experience and time, the right ones will naturally come out when they're needed. And that's the point, that's at the place you want to get to, where it's a natural feeling of what's going to fit best, when it's going to fit best, how it helps the music move along, and how it helps support whatever song you're playing. That's the idea, okay? So in presenting you with these bass runs, I'm going to just step through some of the theory or some of the ways to think about these things so that you'll understand what you're doing, and then later can come up using the same theoretical ideas, come up with your own runs and your own way to change from one chord to the next. That's what I would like to do, so that you can come up with your own stuff later and not just rely on somebody else feeding you things that they know how to do or things that they've done. You can use these ideas to create your own stuff at some point, okay? So that's what we'll do, and today we're just going to talk about the simplest way to change from one chord to the next and help the listener's ear go to anticipate that next change. Okay, the first idea we're going to talk about is just using what's called the leading tone. And the leading tone is, if you take any given scale, it's the 7th scale degree before you go back to the root note of the key in the next octave, okay? So for instance, listen to this. If I played a G scale, okay, your ear's just begging for me to go and resolve that thing, right? Alright, so that's kind of why they call it the leading tone, because in the context of a certain key, that leading tone, if you play that, your ear just wants to hear that resolution back to the home bass, okay? And so if we're playing bass runs, the shortest bass run you can make is just playing that leading tone into the root note of the chord you're moving to. For instance, if I'm in G chord, and I want to move to a C chord, I want to play that leading tone out of the C scale, which is the B note, which is the 7th scale degree of the C scale. So you take the root note of the chord you're going to, back up a half step from the root note of that chord, and that's the leading tone. So if I was going to go from G to C, I would just go, okay? And so if we're playing this boom chick rhythm and we're going 1, 5, 1, 5, after the 5, I'm going to hit that leading tone of whatever chord I'm going to. In this case, I'm going to a C chord, so I'm hitting the B note. After I hit the D note, which is the 5, relative to the G chord. And that's a short run, okay? That is a bass run. It's a one-note bass run. Bass runs can be very long, okay? You can lead in with any number of notes. But here we're going to start simple. We're just going to do a one-note move, okay? So if you're in the key, if you're playing the C chord and want to go to D, you're going to go. Okay, so it's a C sharp note. Now again, I use the 5, which is 5 of relative to C, which is the G. And then I played that C sharp, which relative to the key of D is that 7th scale degree, right? And that moved me into the D chord. So we have the B note moving into C, the C sharp moving into D. Now I could also repeat, I could play that 1. So I could play C, G, C, C, C sharp, D, right? I could do that. whether you play the fifth scale degree first, or back to the 1, and then play the leading tone to the next chord. You could do either one of those, whatever's comfortable for you. It's easier in this case, in the C chord, to just repeat that C note and go up to C sharp. But you could do that either way. Now, if I'm in D and want to go back to G, okay, so again, key of G, the 7th scale degree is at F sharp back to G. So those are ways that you could move from G to C to D and back to G. And I would recommend you just take that and work with it over and over and over again. Real straightforward. Next time we'll add more notes to that run. We'll still use that leading tone, but we'll add more notes. And then later we'll use those same notes, but maybe vary the time duration of the run. Sometimes you can use 8th note runs, sometimes quarter note runs, sometimes even half note runs. We'll explore that. And then we can also add hammers and pulls and slides to the runs to make them a little bit more fancy. We'll do all kinds of stuff coming up here in the future. But for now, just work with G, C, D, going from G to C to D, back to G, and use those leading tones. Now you could, sometimes you might have a song that is in D and moves to C. Again, we're working 1, 4, 5 in the key of G, and sometimes you might have a song that goes straight from G to D, okay? It's the same idea. If I'm in G and I want to go to D, you can do that leading tone out of G, go into the C sharp to D. You can go from a D back to G. Oh, we already did that. You can be in C and go back to G. And again, I'm using 1, 5, 1, 5, then that leading tone to G. If I'm going to, sometimes you might even go from D to C, I'd go. So again, I'm at the D chord and I want to use that B note to move into C. So that's, I think, all the ways that you can move from a 1, a 4, or a 5 to one of those others in the key of G. Most frequently, we're just going to go 1, 4, 5 back to 1. So practice that a lot, but you can practice the other ones as well. I mean, you have a lot of songs like, for instance, Lonesome Road Blues that goes from G to C and then back to G and then back to C. So, use that. You can use those examples to throw into the mix as well. But just spend some time over the next week or so and practice in the key of G, 1, 4, 5 progression, using leading tones going from each of the different chords into the other. Take some songs that you know, your favorite ones, any bluegrass song that you love to play. If it's in a different key, capo it up, and play along with a record, play along with a jam track, play along with your friends, and use this leading tone idea when you're changing chords, and just get so used to it that it becomes second nature. That's what I recommend. And then next time we'll talk about something new. Add something new to your bag of tricks. And each week with this lesson series, we'll add some new stuff, and we'll get into some real cool stuff. We'll get into looking at some things that maybe the old-time players did, some things that were typically done by bluegrass players. We'll take a deep dive into bass runs, and so that'll be kind of fun over the course of the next few weeks, taking a look at that. So for now, this is Dan Miller from Bluegrass Unlimited magazine.